Well, hey there, Atta. How's it going?
Hey, Joshua, how are you?
Doing well. I'm excited to get into the microbiome a little bit with you. In our pre-recording
Yeah.
conversation, you were talking about how you, or many of us, don't even realize we have a microbiome, and maybe we could start there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know about you, but I spent, a big percentage of my life, not knowing that we had beneficial bacteria in our gut. And then when I first heard it, I was like, oh, I doubt it. And then, of course, little by little, everybody starts to get, has their trajectory of like, oh, they hear about yogurt, or maybe they hear about, sauerkraut or something. But
Hmm.
now, fast forward, uh, almost everybody knows about beneficial gut bacteria. Like yeah, it's a whole different game. So, but I think most people's day-to-day lives, we don't spend a lot of time, and yet it's the biggest leverage piece, the most underestimated leverage piece, if you know what I mean. Like a small amount of good effort produces big results in
Hmm.
terms of tending to this garden, if you will, in our gut. What about you? What's your process?
It's interesting as you were talking, I was flashing back to my childhood, and I remember, I probably spent the first 20 years of my life avoiding germs.
Yeah,
And that was the only relationship I would have with any form of a microbiome. And little did I know that you need germs, you need viruses, you need these things in order to have even to maintain an okay life. You need to have a relative level of a microbiome that's functioning. So
yeah,
I would say, um, after years and years of autoimmune and different symptoms and just feeling strange, when I learned about the microbiome, within a year, my life was transforming in ways that it hadn't in 10 years prior of work and trying to figure out my system.
yeah, yeah. Great points. And so I remember when the Human Genome Project was full of buzz in the nutrition science field, the mainstream medical field, and there was really smart people that were hoping that once they mapped the human genome, the whole genetic spectrum in humanity, that would be able to solve 90 something percent of the health issues that humanity faces, ranging from cancers to osteoporosis, et cetera, et cetera. And once that happened, once they, spent all those years and years, mapping, it was a pretty big deal. And then, here we've been living for, what, well over a decade after that project was completed. And it's done very little. It maybe advanced medicine by 5 to 10%, and nutraceuticals by 10 or 15%. That's it. And nobody goes around raving about you know some like genetic. Yeah, there's still some great promise there, but now let's come to the present. The microbiome project, so to speak, is way harder. It's not as easy to quantify, right? Because if we have thousands of different strains of bacteria in our gut, plus maybe a dozen strains of even beneficial viruses in our gut, plus the beneficial, fungi, the fungal kingdom that range from really bad fungus in our gut to really good, depending on the health of this ecosystem. So the first time I heard someone talk about, hey, what's the ecology of your GI tract? I was, what are you talking about? Because I just heard ecology was always this macro thing, not this micro thing right here in
Yeah.
our body.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I'm pretty excited that we're in like in another sort of mini renaissance in nutritional science around the microbiome.
Hmm. Well, this it seems to be bringing us back to that old colloquial of you are what you eat, but this is in a whole nother level
Yeah.
where if we really are what we eat and we have genetics, but we have it interacting through our digestive tract with this living biosphere of all of these varieties of creatures, flora and fauna
Yeah.
inside of us. And to dive into that does seem like it can be overwhelming because you're essentially looking at a horizon of an infinitude of species. But if you take it back and just think, okay, I eat food, it delivers information to my digestion, and that information is translated for better or worse into my body. And then my body is translated into my vitality and quality of life.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Thanks for speaking so clearly that food is information and we are what we eat, because it can get overwhelming. And I've I've danced in and out of that. And you and I have done a lot of research on what strains to include in our probiotics because we can't include all of them. And obviously we focused more on the bacillus strains that can
Mhm.
survive the stomach acids better. And they're a whole different, we can talk about what that is later. But at times I've gotten overwhelmed and then I zoom out and go, well, wait, like, what's the gist of it? It's obviously to eat foods that are full of good probiotics, from sauerkrauts, kimchi's to taking probiotic supplements, etc. But the great thing is the prebiotic science over the last decade that's gotten so interesting. And yeah, there's great prebiotic supplements, but common sense, just eat lots of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds.
Mhm.
And you're feeding all the good bacteria and you're somewhat starving the bad bacteria. But if you eat a lot of sugar and white flour, you know, you're feeding bad bacteria. You're creating this garden for the bad bacteria every time, well, I'll just speak first person. I don't stress over it. If I eat a little junk food, hey, I let myself enjoy it. But look, our health is a little bit like a bank account, right? If you're making way more deposits than withdrawals, you're going to be doing well, right?
That's good. Yeah.
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 So,
Well, let's
uh,
dive into maybe food as information and the prebiotic realm a little bit. I flash back to a joke a dear friend of mine once made when we were starting to get a little hip on the prebiotic thing, and she looks at me, she's like, "Prebiotics, you mean food?" And I
yeah,
laughed. I was like, yes and
yeah,
no, because there is
yeah,
this idea with the fibers that particularly feed the bacteria and ferment really well in the gut,
yeah,
in particular spaces, the small intestine versus the large intestine. And you
yeah,
want to create that biosphere that is going to allow the right bacteria in the right spaces to have the right food to do the right fermentation processes to
yeah,
allow the chemicals to move outward into your body. And it's as simple as making the right choices and not obsessing over when you make the wrong choices.
yeah, exactly. So, what would you say, in terms of your weekly arc? Uh, what do you do for, for your gut health, from prebiotic to, probiotic?
Great
What's working
question.
for, what's your latest, like, leading edge experiment? As I know you're like, we both experiment a lot, and we haven't actually talked about this specific
Yeah,
for a
it's
little
been a
bit.
minute since we've kind of updated on our current. Well, that's a really good question because first off, it is ever evolving and it's not something that I have a single answer for. It seems like every
Yeah,
year my life changes, my body changes, and so my approach and my relationship to my microbiome seems to evolve as well. And I would say there's some fundamental, things I've been doing now for a decade or so that involve regularly taking probiotics and regularly working on stress and these other factors that we'll get into that affect
Yeah.
the actual biome as well. So there's
Yeah.
some lifestyle things, and there's some just a general practice of eating a lot of good plant fiber.
Yeah.
But further than that, I would say in the last 2 years, the biggest breakthroughs I've had once I got into having a solid foundation of the prebiotics and probiotics, constantly, having a daily boost of those two, it
Yeah.
evolved into, well, I'm still feeling a little funky, and what's going on? And so I started investigating my constitution, and those of our listeners who are familiar with Ayurveda understand the constitutions. But essentially, I think the easiest way I can zoom out is, after years of watching my body and my digestive tract, I'm prone to just having slow metabolization. So
Hmm.
things move through me slowly, and there's good
Yeah.
sides of that and there's bad sides of that. And so, in order to deal with a slow metabolization that is actually slowing down further as I'm getting into my mid 30s, I have to take the foot off the gas pedal. And for me, that means fasting. So my understanding from my own body is fasting really seems to work for me. And what I mean by fasting is intermittent. So I definitely skip breakfast. I never eat food. But the earliest I eat will be 11 a.m. And I
Yeah.
try and I find that I function best with a single meal a day, or two smaller meals spaced out within about a 6 hour eating window. So if I
Hmm.
am doing that, allowing my detox pathways, allowing my gut to really have time to fully digest what's in there, then I find that there's more space for vitality in my digestive tract and my whole system. So, long story short,
Yeah.
long-winded way of saying, I like to fast. That works really well for me. And then when I break my fast, I like to do, well, here, I'll show you my green drink.
Uh,
Celery, parsley, cilantro, ginger, a whole lemon with the rind.
ooh, a
That type of,
whole lemonade every
yeah.
day. Ooh,
Every other day, every couple
you're
days,
hardcore.
I find
Yeah.
that is
Cool.
a really good, especially the green bitters with their fiber to boost the probiotics
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
gut, but also the bitters to help my slow detox pathways tonify and move things out. So
Oh
that's
my
kind of
gosh.
my
Brilliant.
my latest is fasting into green drinks into a single meal day, and that's when I feel best. What about you?
Yeah.
I know you've been
Oh,
on this
you.
for a minute.
Oh, I just want to celebrate and applaud how dialed. I mean, watching you from when we first met till now, I'm just going to
Thank you.
celebrate.
Thank
And
you.
to anybody who's listening to this, watching this, yeah, if you get some inspiration off of this, um, yeah. So, some similarities, but a shorter intermittent fasting window. Definitely want to underline that. So, we shoot for eating dinner, roughly 4 o'clock. Sometimes it's 5 o'clock, which isn't the most convenient for social things. So we set that aside maybe once a week for going to a potluck or something. And then in the morning, I get up super early and I'll start with what I like to just call a shot, just as a fun little joke
You say
of
shot.
shot. I know there's a background story to it, but it just keeps it playful. So a small jar of warm water that has um, either some lemon or lime juice, fresh squeezed in there, and Sarvaa Organics, Radiant Recovery, Superfruit C, VB28, so our microbiome, our vibrant biome 28, because it's obviously has a high percentage of the prebiotics that I want to start with. And there's a little bit of prebiotics, obviously, right there in Superfruit C and Radiant Recovery also. So it's a great probiotic, prebiotic start for my gut without any solids. And sometimes I'll put a squirt or two of daily immune boost tincture in it also.
Oh wow, like in there. Cool.
Yeah. And then sometimes I'll add a tiny bit of maybe ginger, turmeric, maybe a little extra tart cherry juice, but it's a small jar, and I'll drink that down.
Are we still on the shot? This is the shot
Yeah,
jar?
this is just the shot. Yeah. So
Yep.
this is just a thin, it's not in a blender. I just shake it up in a
And this is
small
empty
jar,
stomach, first thing after some
empty
warm lemon
stomach.
water or something?
Well, within the lemon water,
Within the
those
lemon water.
ingredients I shake them up in the lemon water in a little jar. So it's a bit of a weird tasting thing, but it's a tonic. It's a tonic way to kind of like, so I haven't fully broken the fast because I'm not chewing, I'm not eating solid food that's difficult to digest. And I'm drinking some water prior to this, probably a good half hour before I even do
Well,
that.
and
I'm just
sorry to
hydrating.
interrupt, but I also want to note that with you out, since there's such a low glycemic impact there, there really isn't much of a fast breaking happening due to
Yeah.
the insulin levels not spiking too much.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's almost no calories in this little shot. It might be 7 or 8 calories because it's a small amount of those powders. And so, and then that um will be, you know, uh, that'll be my start. And then I'll just keep drinking water for any amount of time from an hour to, maybe an hour and a half. Then we'll make up a French press of Sarva conscious cacao and conscious coffee alternative, which of course doesn't have coffee in it. And it's so nourishing, and a little homemade coconut milk. We live here in the tropics where we've got
Yeah, you mean
coconuts down the
literally
street.
homemade.
Yeah, literally, made twice a week. I make coconut milk from fresh coconut meat. So we use that, and we blend it up with a little bit of coconut oil to make a really nice sort of our version of bulletproof coffee with no coffee. However, if you add a little decaf or regular coffee to the French press,
Mm.
hey, no harm. Like sometimes once a week at least, I like to add a little real, you know, coffee to it just for fun, like 25% coffee. But anyway, so that's again, but they're now I've definitely broken the fast. And if this might be, an hour after the little shot, but there's lots of good prebiotics in conscious coffee and conscious cacao, and that's fun. And then maybe 2 hours later, we'll finally eat breakfast, 9 or 10.
Hmm.
So that's our like routine to give the body a break. So dinner, shooting for 4 o'clock, sometimes 5, and then breakfast 9
Okay, so
ish.
there's some consistencies between us two, and obviously we're men, so our bodies are more in that direction. But there is a space of time that we do like to do the intermittent fasting thing to give digestion and detox time to fully do its work.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And
And
and that also we could have a whole another conversation about, what we do to support, keeping our systemic inflammation, at a healthy level. And this, we do this intermittent fasting, obviously, for both to support our microbiome, to support our immune system, to support our nervous system, and to be, a really big piece of an anti-inflammatory lifestyle.
mm, great. Well, the anti-inflammatory lifestyle is something I would like to maybe end on because that's really important. So, we have dove into a little bit of our morning routines. We're moving through our rhythm of eating and then reintroducing our beginning of prebiotics in the beginning of the day. And you said you also have the probiotics in there on that first shot. And
Mm-hmm.
so now let's move into what's actually happening in the body then. We've got our prebiotics starting up, our digestion's firing up, and we're kind of leaning into epigenetic land a little bit. So maybe we should dive into what's really happening from there.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, exciting. So literally every bite of food we eat, every swallow of every liquid is loaded with information. Yes, there's nutrients, There's, macronutrients like carbs and fiber and protein and fats, and there's, micronutrients. And but there's genetic information. Well, okay, water doesn't have genetic information that I know of. Does it? Maybe it does. I haven't really
It has
thought of that.
vibrational, which
Yeah,
would
it's
interact with it. So,
definitely has molecular, atomic, yeah, vibrational energy. Um, and that's a different topic. But every bite of food we eat and every beverage, that's got so-called, food value to it is delivering to us benefits or detriments in some percentage, right?
mhm.
And that information is also analogous in a different topic, but there's non-physical food. There's media food that we consume, from the music we listen to the podcasts like this, that are information, clearly information. But what you're saying with the edible food information is a whole new paradigm. And I like to just zoom out and go, how does it feel? How does it look? How does a salad, look and feel versus maybe a fast food burger or burrito?
Mhm, mhm. And
There's very different information embedded in. What about you?
well, I think the information thing is nuanced, but it also makes a lot of sense to me in that essentially it's kind of like I think it was Sayer G who called it software for our
Oh
body's
yeah,
hardware. But
yeah.
we eat these prebiotics, this food,
Hmm.
ideally things that help support the pathways of our body to function in a way that's going to create vitality. And adding in the right fibers and the right timing and the right lifestyle around the microbiome, it helps it to develop, to share instructions with our cells to express the healthy versions of our genetics. I've heard a variety of metaphors around, the genetics kind of set the stage for what could happen, but your lifestyle and your diet and the prebiotic information you're continually adding to your body is what gives that genetic information the yes or no to express itself. And so genes
Yeah,
are only part of the story. And if we're adding in the right prebiotic information and the right lifestyle and the right mindset on top of it, because it's connected to what there's twice as many neural endings in the digestive tract as there are in the brain.
yeah,
Um, just that variety of exploring the internal workings in a simple way, just a human way. Like this food,
yeah.
I tend to feel good. I have less inflammation show up. And maybe actually now would be a good time to kind of dive into some canary in the coal mine talk to help wrap around our relationship with prebiotics and how they affect us. I don't know if you want to dive into any of your canary in the coal mines and how they relate to your inflammation and microbiome.
Oh, well, you know what? Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought that up. But I want to just go back one step and say how important it is for us to learn a little more about this topic that you talked about. That are the genetics that we were born with, the sort of inherited genetics, um, are for sure they're important. And epigenetics is this co-creation, this moment by moment, even what we breathe. Like when we're at the gas station filling, our gas pump and we're breathing some fumes, that's actually, some of that information is entering our body. Luckily, we don't do that every day or twice a day. That's who knows how often, once a week. But back to what you were saying is that here's this base layer of genetics that we were born with, and we keep layering in every day, every meal, and as this vast amount of genetic information, one bite of a salad, one bite of a stir fry, especially one bite of a fermented food like sauerkraut or kimchi, has an enormous amount of so-called data in it. And that data comes and lands in with our existing cellular structure. And as our body, first place it meets is our esophagus, and then our stomach, and then our small intestine. And that just keeps vibrating, energetically, but also informationally. And that genetic layers in. And as you said, these neutral parts of our base layer genetics, right, that can go kind of left or right, can go positive or negative when, the nice stir fry of our, organic veggies comes in and lands in our body. That's helping our base layer express beautifully upwardly, as opposed to foods that are toxic for us. They're going to hit our base layer genetics and are going to suppress, right? So we want to express up, a better way. So really wanted to just emphasize that the more we visualize these energy flows, we don't have to like micromanage and calorie count and, micronutrient count. That's worthless. In fact, counterproductive.
That's
More intuitive, holistic approach, and trusting the entourage effect, like Whole Foods have all the cofactors to help, one thing another digest. So one of the reasons sauerkrauts have stood the test of time and are typically a way better tool than, say, yogurts is that the prebiotic fiber in those vegetables, whether it's cabbage, whether it's carrots, whether it's beets, whether it's, we do a homemade ginger beet sauerkraut that is amazing.
wow.
So anyway, so yeah, when you've got prebiotic fiber and the probiotics together, that's such a great combo, and that really helps our cells express, positively as opposed to negatively.
Mhm. Well, that's really beautiful. And I think it's also a good point that when you're adding in the right factors to create vitality in your microbiome, that energy is available for creating further vitality. Now, when we break our rules and we eat things that we shouldn't, and we do it a couple days in a row, that stacks. And now that energy, not only is there less energy in that food to begin with, any energy we had in our bodies for trying to create energy from food is now spent detoxing and moving those things out of us. So what would have
Yeah,
been building vitality, been in a deposit in our bank account, as you put it, is
yeah,
actually just spent just trying to clean up the bank account to make room for a future good deposit in general.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
those types of things can lead to some canary in the coal mine situations where if once you start to get ahead of your body and know, hey, I got bit by a mosquito a few days ago and I forgot about it, but I just ate some ice cream and now I've got an itchy big mosquito bite and it wasn't there for 2 days. Why is that? These little,
excellent point.
yeah,
Yeah,
these like I forget the hangnails, like most of the time they don't hurt, but man, today I didn't realize I had hangnails. It's like all these layers of symptoms that are actually just canary in the coal mine telling us, hey, by the way, whatever's going on down low is the energy isn't being spent efficiently to build vitality and make a deposit in the bank account.
right. So great one. Yeah. So my canaries in the coal mine, like, so first one is just base layer, like quantity of food eaten versus quantity of food needed.
Mm.
And if I have any real burping, let alone belching, like I notice that. So if I'm eating the right amount, especially doing intermittent fasting, means that my digestion is quite good and I'm noticing very little. And I don't mean burping from eating drinking some bubbly water. That's a different kind of burp. I mean like those kind of burps that are well after a meal, and it just sort of feels like, you know, digestion has been sluggish, maybe because, I overpacked the stomach. It's best to, only eat a meal that fills 2/3 to 3/4 of our stomach, not jammed full. That just makes it a little harder for the stomach to do its process. So burping's number one. And then number two would be later in the process is just general, like how much gas maybe is being produced. And to get maybe a little more personal, but what level of smell? Like a little bit of air farts, no big deal. But like hot, stinky farts, that's a big, let's just get granular here
Yep.
for a sec.
Yep.
That's a big canary in the coal mine of like, okay, make note of that. Let's not do that food combination or that combination. Or did I eat while I was driving because I was in a rush and my digestion was not optimal?
So
So,
dialing in like what are canaries in the coal mine can really help us figure out what is building our microbiome's vitality and what is taking away from it. And let's see from there.
and then
We
for a lot of people, it's brain fog, X number of like an hour after me, or sugar blues, that's like
mm,
obviously something that has, a high glycemic load. And, maybe especially like, I'll just use the example, muffins or, something like that from, baked goods are sometimes not optimal. And, unless they're done in a really, really, really smart way. And so people talk about the pasta syndrome of feeling sleepy after. So that's another one, brain fog or energy drop 45 minutes to an hour and a half after meals,
yeah.
so.
Yeah, because in general, after meals, if you're building vitality in the microbiome, you're going to build energy, and the digestion process shouldn't feel like something you need to recover from. It should be something that's revitalizing you. And a
Right.
lot of that is surrounded around the microbiome.
Yeah. So I'd say that we've got the short-term canary in the coal mines that we've talked about that are literally like 45 minutes to 3 hours post meal that kind of give us some immediate, feedback loops. But I'd say the other thing to really look at is the longer arc. So, um, gosh, it must have been 6 or 7 years ago when it was really stressful. You know, uh, you know, period of time at Sarva. Like we went through a difficult, like bit there for a couple of years as we were, growing from tiny, tiny, tiny to, a little bit bigger and moving facilities and, running out of capital, all that stuff. So I was super stressed, working crazy long hours. And this was, back whatever, 7 years ago ish, or maybe six, before you came and helped me turn the corner, and you lowered my stress so much. Thank you. But anyway, I got blood work done that showed that I was on the verge of having Hashimoto's autoimmune disease, like that I was like within a whisker. And I was floored. Here I eat this great diet. I'm running this superfood company, and I've got this autoimmune diagnosis. Like I'm right at the edge of, like going over down the slope, so to speak. And that was a wake up call about a couple of things, because that was a huge canary in the coal mine, was getting some blood work done, right? And so that inspired me to also do um, stool tests, and also, um, hormone tests, both saliva based and urine based hormone tests throughout the day, where you take a sample 4 times in a day to get some good data on what are those so-called canary in the coal mines that actually take a little more research and diagnostics to do. And, I used uh, a naturopathic doctor to, help me order, those tests, and to find out whether I had any, what's called gut permeability. So gut permeability, that the lining of our small intestine is incredibly thin, and it's delicate, and there's all kinds of things that aggravate our intestinal lining. And there's these fine hairs even on the inside called villi that get irritated. And one of the biggest irritants, of course, is, um, toxins, obviously, things that are just generally toxin, from pesticides to herbicides to, plastic residues, and then to food toxins or aggravants. And I'll say mild allergens for some people, like gluten, like dairy, like, maybe anything on the big eight allergen, the FDA's big eight allergen list of things like soybeans, peanuts, shellfish, dairy, gluten, a couple others. Oh yeah, certain tree nuts. So for some people, some of those items can be gut irritants. And then that creates a stack effect. So if you've got three of those eight things that are mild gut irritants for you, you could develop some gut permeability. And you want to know whether you've got either intracellular or extracellular, or both versions of gut permeability, that is like creating that leaky gut syndrome, that's more properly known as gut permeability. We don't want that to be permeable. We don't want big molecules of food to pass through our gut lining. And then our immune system is constantly working overtime to process this invader. Whereas when our gut lining is healthy, and that's one of the reasons we put L-glutamine amino acid in Vibrant Biome 28 and 58, right?
Hmm.
Is to support gut health in addition to the prebiotics. But there's so many things that we can do just to remove aggravants.
Hmm.
And so those long-term canary in the coal mines that don't show up quickly and give us fast feedback are probably the ones we can go into denial about, them being there. So I really want to put in a plug for knowing your data. And, maybe it's only every 5 years, but maybe if you've got some health issues, it's every, 1.5 to 3 years where you're checking in and doing those diagnostics. And yeah, a lot of people get grossed out about doing a stool test, also known as a poop test. That's getting a little bit more intimate with what's coming out of your microbiome than you want, but do it. It's worth it. Like, good data is gold, especially nowadays. The poop test used to be pretty lame 10 years ago. Now, way
It's
better.
hyper dialed. Well,
Yeah. And
to
yeah,
recap that a little bit, working with the intestinal lining and stacking aggravants can create a permeability in the intestinal wall that allows undigested food to escape out into the body, which then triggers the immune system. And then not only does
yes.
the immune system deal with that in that moment, but it also gets trained to look around the body and attack things. So it
Yeah.
gets
Thank you.
aggravated in general. And thus you have autoimmune lift up, and the immune system automatically starts to attack varieties, even parts of your body that are fine.
Yeah.
So
Especially the thyroid, especially the other parts of the endocrine
yeah,
system.
there
Yeah.
seems to be
And
some
the
more
joints.
vulnerable spaces that are affected by our lifestyle and our stress levels and things. And then so we have gut permeability that triggers an immune response, and then we have a thyroid or adrenals that are stretched thin from a long work lifestyle, and this whole system kind of crumbles together, but it rebuilds together too. And it really is
Yeah.
centered around that microbiome and learning the language of our canaries in the coal mines to get intimate with how we are affecting ourselves in those short-term arcs and the long-term arcs.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
thank you. Let's see. Why don't we talk about allergies? Because everyone thinks allergies, not everyone, but I
Oh,
myself included a lot, thought allergies are something that we're human. We have allergies.
great. Yeah. Yeah. So this is definitely one of the most misunderstood and underappreciated areas of, human health. And a lot of people say, oh yeah, I'm stuck with it. I got, it's seasonal allergies, blah, blah, blah. And yet okay, so I got to the point where I couldn't even mow the grass 20 years ago before I knew about this. Like, I just thought, okay, I can't deal with mowing the grass. I'm too
I
allergic
was the
to
same
the,
way. I tried not to breathe for April and May.
yeah. Yeah. Anyway, and then like for some people, it's as simple as removing two aggravants from their system. And for some, it's just cutting back on dairy. Others, it could be gluten. Others, it could be sugars. And when I say sugars, I just want to, not everybody equates eating white flour-based products as sugars, but because even brown rice flour based products, they digest so quickly in the body compared to like eating, say rice or quinoa or buckwheat, etc., in whole form. And they're actually yummier to eat whole form. So I'm putting in a plug for those kind of, and especially because technically buckwheat and quinoa aren't even grains; they're seeds. So they got a lot of great, proteins, etc. So, but yeah, those all those assumptions about we're stuck with allergy are bogus. It's just not true. And once I cleaned up my diet in a couple of ways, and especially started loving on my microbiome, my whole GI tract, from literally, yoga, meditation, tai chi, qigong, time in nature, um, support for our gut health, the nervous system based support. We haven't even talked about, the fact that all of this is tied into the autonomic nervous system, the general tone of our autonomic nervous system, and the gut interaction. But this topic specifically about allergies is really important to bring that up. Stress level does affect that too,
Hmm.
but just removing a few aggravants from the diet and the lifestyle, and allergies can either be diminished 80%, the suffering, like diminished 80% is way better than any med can do.
Hmm. Hmm. It was the same way for me. I can now look back retrograde on my life and map out when my gut permeability was increasing, and the way I can dial that in and calendar that out is remembering how horrible I mean completely debilitating my allergies were,
Yeah.
for a stretch of 5 or 6 years. And I thought, well, I'm getting older and my allergies are getting worse. And, those were both true statements to a degree, but getting older really meant my intestinal wall was becoming more permeable. My stress levels were increasing. My autonomic nervous system was not tonified and balanced. And as a result, I am not joking. When I tried not to breathe, I would purposely, luckily I had some yoga background, so I would only breathe out of my mouth for like 3 or 4 weeks. I would just sit there and mouth breathe, which, by the way, is not a healthy thing for your nervous system or your jaw or any of it. But that's a different topic. But essentially,
Yeah.
as I was starting to dial in, hey, for example, one morning I had a smoothie before I went to work, and it was probably the worst day at work I've ever had. I had water pouring out of my face for like 2 hours. I mean, just straight water, that my allergies were so bad. And I thought, you know what,
Wait,
this is so intense and so out of nowhere. Something is up. And I was like, what did I do that's different this morning? Oh, I had that smoothie. And over years, I got to test that again and again and again. And basically, when I introduced inflammatory foods into a system that was already
wait, what kind
prone,
of was it? A smoothie that was like
full of
sugary? What?
sugar and
Oh,
cold
okay.
fruits and
Yeah. Okay.
and peanut butter.
Oh
So
my
it
goodness.
was just the combo of everything. I'm pretty sure it was a chocolate cherry peanut butter super decadent awesome smoothie, and it was one of the hardest worst allergy days of my entire life.
Yeah.
But essentially, in the peak of that stress, that permeability of my gut, reintroducing aggravating foods, in the middle of a season when, yes, there are allergens floating in the air in April and May, and particularly in our area in Colorado. You combine all of those, and my immune system's already on fire because of the permeability in my gut,
Right.
and it's running around my body looking for invaders, and it's confusing my own food and nutrients in my bloodstream as invaders, and then you add on seasonal allergies on top of it. So long story
Yeah.
short, after I started working with my gut and healing, focusing intentionally on healing my gut permeability, years later, I realized it was June and I hadn't even thought about allergies. I made it through what were my hell months and hadn't even blinked, hadn't even remembered that I had had allergies at one point. Vanished.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's this we're talking a little bit more about, these traditional kind of allergies, but then there's all these skin, like symptom, allergies that the microbiome can solve from and again, the combination of the autonomic nervous system and removing some food aggravants for eczemas and psoriasis and et cetera. And just like um, itching parts of our body, even if it doesn't create, any kind of specific, dermatitis that's visible. That's a sign also to look
Mm-hmm.
for. That's one of the canaries in the coal mine. When you brought up the mosquito bite flare up, like living here in Hawaii, get this, allergy season is pretty much 12 months of the year.
Yeah.
There's 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 stuff blooming all the time here in the tropics, so yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah.
It's a perfect environment for getting to see, like, oh, it's not something that is happening externally, seasonally. It's, well, there's these factors that are interrelating with my internal environment, thus the microbiome and its biodiversity and its ecosystem in equilibrium is a very good place to intend our daily practices to lead us.
Yeah, exactly. And really, I mean, there's so many surprising, upsides when we get our diet dialed in. And you brought up constitution. When we understand our constitution, we understand, our baseline genetics. And because my baseline genetics are a little different than yours, and my consciousness is a little different than my lifestyle. So as we look at the these things, and we start to get more and more, um, you know, uh, sensitive and aware of how we can keep fine tuning it and just have a commitment to excellence at, in terms of loving our body, mind, and soul so much that we take great care of all parts of our beingness, then we don't even know how many problems we've avoided. Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I I'm 65 and I have been to a doctor so few times in the last 5 years. And my, my brother, who's a year and a half, within a year and a half of me, is kind of at a doctor like every other week for
Mm-hmm.
the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to just say to everyone, it's worth it. There's so much upside, things that we'll never know we avoided. So if you're at all
Never know.
discouraged, take heart. It's so worth loving on your microbiome.
Well, it's never too late to heal the gut. I mean, we can do it in periods of 24 hours. We can do it in periods of a week, 3 weeks, 3 years, 3 decades. All of that space has poignant times of working with the microbiome that's going to allow us to upgrade our experience on Earth.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's probably a good space to look. Maybe let's touch on the autonomic nervous system for closing, and how we move out of microbiome into lifestyle and these types of things, and how that affects, again, the microbiome and the whole system.
Yeah. Well, it's some of the research is relatively nascent and not, super well developed, but they have shown correlations with, like stressful thoughts, how quickly it starts to show up in the blood chemistry, like hormone levels will maybe show up first. Obviously things like cortisol, is gonna show up in the blood chemistry first. But then shortly after that, it's going to like be so um uh energetically disruptive to the gut, that the microbiome starts to shift. And as woo woo as it might sound, that more stress diminishes the health of the sensitive little beings in our gut. And so um, please don't underestimate your autonomic nervous system. I know in the last time you interviewed me, we mentioned the famous Dr. Gonzalez, and when he would be interviewed and people would ask him what are his top three, factors in human health, and he'd say, well, number one, the autonomic nervous system health. Number two, the autonomic nervous system health. Number three, autonomic nerve. Yeah, just to really make the point, just because it isn't tangible like food itself, or as like an organ, thinking about the kidney or the liver or the heart is tangible. You can picture it. You've seen pictures. The autonomic nervous system is this amorphous thing, and don't underestimate it. Love it up, love it up, love it up.
Well, it really does oversee so much of the communication inside and outside the body. And as we move into more of a sympathetic state and we're in the fight or flight or freeze place, not only are we creating a vibe that's going to affect our microbiome, we're also, at least me, I'm going to be more likely to go and eat some carbohydrates that probably aren't going to deal with me that day because
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
stressed out. That ice cream is calling to me. And
Yeah.
it's it's the way the cycle unfolds. And so if we can back it up and approach that from the other direction and just think, okay, my state of mind is deeply interrelated with my state of nervous system and my lifestyle. And if I'm getting exercise, if I'm out in nature, these things affect the magnetic field. They affect the way that our nerves are
Right.
firing. Further, even just the getting into sympathetic nervous system and the way that it can prevent the full firing of signals through the nervous system. If you are constantly getting hit by stress bumps and cortisol things, impacts, when your system's trying to talk to itself from head to toe and you're in the middle of a signal being sent and you get hit by a stress, that signal can be interrupted. And if you're
Right.
working in a way with daily nervous system impacts, that's going to affect the decisions you make about diet, the way that you are using your limbs, the way that you are allowing your nervous system to fully send signals back and forth. And it's really important to clear the mechanism in that way too, so that the nerves can be signaling all the way through
Yeah.
rhythmically. And that
Hmm.
is one of the ways that when you're sending those signals through the nervous system down to all the little nerve endings in the digestive tract, if they are getting complete signals and then they're able to communicate with the microbiome, then we're in a really good place.
Yeah. So on that note, what kind of breathing techniques do you find are helpful to you? Like, do you ever like find yourself in a moment at work where it's busy and maybe, two or three things are pulling at you, and then all of a sudden you're noticing your breath get shallow and you've got to like,
Oh yeah.
how do you deal with that in those times of,
I make breathing not just a daily focus. I make it a minute by minute focus. I think if I can approach my day where I always have this little reminder, like how's your breath, that
yeah,
allows me to move into a lot of good decisions preventatively. But I'd say for me, breathing through the nose is the simplest and easiest way. Landing the
yeah,
jaw softly and breathing through the nose. And then you can do a variety of things. There's the square breath, the 4-second inhale, 4-second hold, 4-second exhale, 4-second hold. That one's
Yeah.
fantastic. Even the Navy SEALs are
Yeah.
claiming that as the Navy
Oh,
SEAL breath
totally.
these days.
Yeah.
And then for the yogis out there, one of the Nadi Shodanas and working with the left and right
Hmm.
channels of
Yeah.
the body through the nays. What about you?
Excellent. Same. And yeah, minute by minute practice. There's nothing that is a more immediate canary in the coal mine about the state of the autonomic nervous system for the human creature as, the breath, and I'll catch myself being, buzzy and multitasky and like, oh, whoa, where's my breath and my heart rate? Like all that correlation of my breath and
Yeah.
heart rate. And I'll go, oh, wow, okay. So for any long, slow, inhalation through the nose, and actually there is one yogic technique, one exception to the mouth breathing is exhale through the mouth with a little bit of that sound of E. So, a long, slow inhale through the nose, the Ujjayi breath for those who are into yoga, but to really get it more embodied and tangible, a mouth exhale can really like be calming quickly. It's yeah. Anyway, so that's just a little tidbit that I'll throw in is occasionally if I'm nervous and stressed, like for instance, I had to have, some oral surgery done not too long ago. And boy, was I practicing while they were prepping me, long inhalations through the nose and at times to stay with my breath, exhalations through the mouth with that E sound.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Until the
Mm-hmm.
nurse walked in and then I kind of made
Absolutely.
it silent.
Yeah. Back to normal. Quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good topic to touch on as well. In the center, gravitating, orbiting around the microbiome, all of it's connected. And the way that we're working with our nervous system, and the way we can dial in more of a relationship with these trillions of beings inside of us that are helping us express health or lack thereof, the better. So, breathing, the way we touch in with our stress, the way we look at the whole system in very simple ways, and forgive ourselves when we forget. It's
Yeah.
just make it simple, make it human, and make it holistic.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, let's see. I think that pretty much covers most of it. We went into allergies and leaky gut. We got some autoimmune and inflammation in there. We started with the prebiotics and probiotics in the way that they work through the epigenetic expression into creating who we are on a day to day, bite by bite, breath by breath basis. So
Yeah.
that's all from me. Anything else from your end?
No, I just maybe to one little kind of catchy wrap up on, like to think about the microbiome and just to make it kind of easy is that, the microbiome is doing two things. It's both taking out the trash and it's manufacturing nutrients, right? So, the microbiome is eliminating toxins, it's eliminating waste, but it's also creating nutrients. It's not creating minerals, but it's creating vitamins and it's creating short chain fatty acids that we need. Like, so the short chain fatty acid butyrate, for instance, which, is somewhat underestimated, uh, at least 65% of that creation happens in the gut, in the gut flora. So just one little fun tidbit. Your gut is either taking out the trash and or making food to help you be vibrant. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, good to see you, and we'll
Yeah,
tune
good to
in
see
next
you.
time.
Thanks.
So, thanks for
All
listening,
right.
everybody.
Blessings to everybody, to your health.
Remember the podcast 20 coupon if you so desire to use it. And other than that, we'll see you next time. Take care.
Great. Take care.